Our next guest describes himself as a regular guy, even though he's led an extraordinary life. Born with a passion for adventure, he's crisscrossed the world like his childhood heroes, Indiana Jones, James Bond, and Jack Ryan, both as a solo traveler and working for the Central Intelligence Agency. After redirecting his career, he's ready to release his debut novel, Downrange, which goes on sale tomorrow. Good morning, author and sixth-generation Texan, Taylor Moore.
Good morning. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. All right. I say sixth generation Texan. Your family actually was in Texas before Texas became a republic, which they helped to do.
That's absolutely correct. Yeah, I'm Robert Taylor Moore, and the original Robert Moore came here before it was actually Texas and fought in the Battle of San Jacinto.
Wow. You grew up in kind of an iconic Texas life, if you will, Navasota farm and a ranch. And so you had that kind of simple life, but wholesome life. Is that the reason why your imagination was so spurred and you loved the sense of adventure?
I think so. I grew up out on our farm and ranch, and so I spent a lot of time by myself. I was an only child until the age of 10, so I kind of had to make up my own stories living out there, and so I would just go out and have adventures on my own and just make up stories. That was what I did, and that's how I sort of entertained myself. And so, kind of not surprisingly, years later, that imagination has continued and come into the book writing world.
Yeah, Indiana Jones, James Bond. A lot of us grew up with that sense of adventure with them. Of course, my mom's James Bond was Sean Connery. Mine was
Yeah.
Roger Moore. My son doesn't know who James Bond is. Who was your James Bond?
Roger Moore was my James Bond because that was the guy when we'd go to the movies and see James Bond up on the big screen. That was Roger Moore. So I love Sean Connery because I'd get the old VHS tapes and watch them, but Roger Moore was it for me.
Yeah, now I know how old you are because we're like the same guy. Okay, you have such
Exactly.
a great sense of wanting to know knowledge. Your journalism degree at Texas A&M, public policy master's at Pepperdine. You traveled extensively around the world, and that sense of adventure. You backpacked in Uruguay, Chile, Peru, over the Andes to the jungles in Bolivia. You crossed the raging Drake Passage on the Russian icebreaker to Antarctica. So the time when you were doing this, you were fulfilling that sense of adventure that you had only dreamed about as a child.
Right. Right. Yeah, that was something I'd always wanted to do. And even though, just growing up on this farm and ranch, I'd always had this thirst, to go on some sort of international adventure. And my mom, she grew up overseas. She grew up in South America because her dad was in the oil business. And so I'd hear these stories about living in the jungle or living down in Argentina, and I just wanted to go experience that for myself. And so I went down and basically backpacked around for about 6 months and just did kind of this solo journey. I just wanted to see if I could do it and survive it. And thank goodness I did, but yeah, that's what I always wanted to do. And the Antarctica thing was just sort of happened while I was down there. And that was the world that I love. And that was what I was passionate about. I loved all things international and particularly travel and learning about new cultures. And that was it for me.
And it's all laying the groundwork for becoming a novelist. But before you did that, how did you transition into a career in the CIA, the stuff that a lot of us just kind of dream of?
Yeah, people always want to know that because it's a strange transition if you think about it. Because only 2 years before I was back, working with my dad and farming and ranching, and so they said, "How did you go from that to within 2 years?" But it actually makes sense, given my the graduate school. What I did there, I studied economics and international relations, and I did a graduate level internship at the U.S. Mission to the European Union in Belgium, and so I had this international trade experience, and of course, the experience that I talked about on my journey down through South America. I just had sort of built a resume in terms of experience and education that sort of lent itself to working in the spy world, and so that's how that all came together.
Yeah. All right. Give us the inspiration for Downrange.
So downrange, really, it's kind of an interesting story. I was originally writing the book that I got my agent with was more of a traditional spy thriller. It was kind of more in the line of a Brad Thor, that type of book. And so that's how I got my agent. But as I was writing, I rewrote that book several times, and only to have my agent tell me, he said, "There's this Garrett Cole character in this book, and Garrett was a secondary character, a DEA agent over in Afghanistan." He's like, "Man, there's something about that guy. He's like, I think that's your protagonist." And So believe it or not, I ended up scrapping that book that I'd rewritten several times, and started an entirely new series set in Texas with a DEA agent named Garrett Cole, and so that's how he got started.
Yeah, and you know when you're writing fantasy, a lot of times people think you just can make the whole thing up, but you pay attention to detail. You do all the research, accurate details, which makes sense given your background. You learned the cowboy life, law enforcement, even when you went that far.
Yeah. Kind of growing up on a farm and ranch, I sort of knew that background. Grew up riding horses and working cattle and doing all those kind of things, and so that was that experience. Then, of course, working in intel with the CIA, and then working with the military as a contractor. I had that, but when I really started writing the book, there was things that I wanted to get perfectly. I wanted to get them just right. And so, if you see some of those pictures that you're flashing up on the screen, I would
Yeah.
go out and meet with people and learn roping, learn riding, how people can ride and shoot. And I would meet with these guys that did that professionally. As you can see there, yeah, these guys, high plains drifters, man. And so I would learn from the best of the best. And so when people read the books, or read the book, they're going to see there's helicopters, there's all this, yeah. So I went shooting out of a helicopter. I would reach out to people that were, part of the Night Stalkers, the Special Operations Air Wing, and that focused on helicopters in the military, former Special Operations Forces, SEALs, Green Berets, all those things, to try to get all the details just right. So I grew up with all those things, and then I try to do them myself to do research for the book, but then I reach out to experts as well.
What I love about books is that it's almost like a partnership with the author, right? When we're reading, because we kind of bring our experience with it and how we would interpret what it is that you're saying to us. But overall, what do you want someone to get out of this book, Downrange?
I want people to be entertained by it. It's written to be entertainment. It's written to be fun. So I want people to be on a thrill ride. I want people riding across the high plains, galloping on a quarter horse, shooting at the bad guys. And so it's meant to be just pure fun, pure entertainment. And I wrote it to be a page turner. Obviously, it's a thriller. And I've had more than a few readers tell me they spent way too many late nights trying to get some resolution, and I don't allow that. So you're gonna get in there, and you're not gonna be able to put it down till you get to the end of the book.
Yeah, if we don't get any resolution, that means there's another book to come. I think I smell a series going
Oh
on
yeah,
right here. Taylor, thank you
you
very
better
much.
believe it.
And then movies,
Yeah,
and then
thanks.
movies, right?
And then movies, absolutely. So we'll see what comes next.
All right. Thank you very much for sharing your time with us this morning.
Thank you for having me on.